All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's guest webinar. Let's get Sean online. This week we are looking at living walls, certainly a growing and continually trending topic in the landscape and architectural industry. That's why this week we have Sean Brennan from Filtrexx to discuss living wall systems and help us understand the best solutions for our own needs. Sean is a Cal Poly San Luis Obispo graduate and a Central Coast native. He's been a licensed landscape contractor, run his own landscaping company, had sales and management roles in well-renowned irrigation and paver manufacturing companies. And all of these experiences have made him well-versed at understanding landscape products and their applications in numerous environments. So, if you have any questions throughout the webinar today, please just type them into the Q&A window, which can be accessed by clicking the Q&A button in the upper right-hand corner of your screens. We'll try our best to answer what we can on the go. Otherwise, we'll be passing these on to Sean to answer directly when we have a moment during the presentation or at the very end. So I'll hand this over now to Sean for our first guest webinar of 2018. Take it away, Sean.
Hey, thank you, Damien. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, got you all good.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. Really appreciate everyone taking their time out to learn about living walls. And again, appreciate this opportunity. So thank you, Damien. Today, we're going to look at our system of living walls. I've been in the landscape business for a cumulative about 15 years, and I've been with Filtrexx for about 2 years. And living walls is one of our products in our portfolio, but I'm by no means an expert in vertical living walls. There's a lot to it, but from these last 2 years, I think I've gained some good knowledge. So we're just going to jump right in and talk about the applications of our walls here. So again, living walls. I think everyone sees the trend that living walls are becoming prolific, interior, exterior, high-end residential, commercial, edible walls. We're seeing a lot of calls for people wanting to grow food vertically, and so that's kind of exciting. And we're going to look at a case study later on in the presentation about how living walls can help with stormwater solutions. Basically being able to mitigate stormwater issues. And then obviously reducing the urban heat island effect, where, there's a lot of places where there's just big, huge blank walls of concrete that creates some serious heat issues. And I imagine a lot of you, know there's a lot of beneficial applications to living walls. Basically, we're going to look at this is a quick little snapshot of what our wall looks like. We're going to look at how our system works, how it's able to overcome some of the challenges that a lot of living walls have, and again, a lot of issues they're expensive. I mean, when a customer, developer, homeowner, finds out the price per square foot, they're thinking they'd rather have a new car. But again, so living walls. Problems with living walls is they're expensive. The second thing is that sometimes they're hard to install. You have to get lifts. There's a lot of technical issues with installing systems. And then definitely maintenance is an issue. Getting the correct plant selection is a huge deal with living walls. If indoor, outdoor, you want to make sure the correct plant selection is there. And a landscape architect kind of gave me a great quote. I talked to her about our system and living walls, and she said, "It's like having a pet." I don't want to give a pet to my customer or client. Basically, it's like someone dropping a pet off at your front door. Basically, obviously, she meant the maintenance of the living wall systems. There's a lot of maintenance issues. The way we've overcome this is we have 5 simple components in our Vertexx system. It's a wall anchor. Basically, you got to anchor to a structure that's already sound. We have a wire that's kind of the skeleton of the system. We have our patented tray that hooks onto the wire. You need a 1/4-inch drip emitter line, and then our GardenSoxx, which is our planting material. So we've kind of boiled it down to, distilled it down to 5 simple components that are easy to install, easy to maintain, and basically the components are easy to work with. And we're going to go through each one of these components just to give you an idea what they look like. First off, really quick, our Filtrexx, our company is all about sustainable technologies. Everything we do, we use organic composted material that's from a certified compost site. So what we try to do is help with recycled organics, finding a place for those recycled organics to go. On the left, we have filter media. We do a lot of work in the erosion control world using compost to help filter out stormwater and sediment. And on the right is our growing media. So compost is a big component of our GardenSoxx, which is a great material to grow living walls in. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and let you know that, again, we're about sustainability, using organic recycled compost and to find a home for it. So again, on with our Vertexx system. So again, here's all the components in place. And again, we'll go through each one of these one by one. So the anchors we work with a company called Gripple. They are, I believe they're out of the UK, but basically Gripple works with a lot of developments, high-rise construction on creating anchors that help with holding components in place. So we use a Gripple anchor. If you can put a concrete screw into a wall or a wood screw into a wall, you can install our system. Pretty simple. These anchors are installed on a structure that's sound, has to be a sound structure that can handle the weight of the system. And then it's easily adjustable. So again, there's the Gripple anchor. That's the first component that gets installed. Again, just simply bolted. This happens to be a concrete wall on the side of a hotel, but these anchors are just bolted in with Tapcon concrete screws. The next component, which is the skeleton of the system, is our galvanized wire. We have this made specifically for us in 4x8 panels. It's 4 gauge, and then it's easily cut, for custom projects. 1 square foot is the minimum size that you can have. So anything 1 square foot and above, if you have a kind of a weird wall that you want to, put something, I could do a window around it or frame something, you can cut this galvanized wire, and our system is easily customized. Again, the skeleton of the wall. Next is our Vertexx tray. So basically you put the anchor on, put the galvanized wire in place onto the Gripple anchors, and then snap our galvanized tray right into place. So the galvanized wire, the plastic tray goes onto the galvanized wire. So it snaps right into place. The galvanized wire is made specifically for these trays to snap into place. It's a recycled plastic, a UV stability of 7 years. And then we'll look at this later on in the slideshow, but it can hold water, 1/8 of an inch water at the base, so that the plants have access from the roots, right at the roots with the water. And then our secret sauce, if you will, is our GardenSoxx. So this is basically what allows a living wall system to succeed or not to succeed is if the plants get watered and if they have growing material to grow in for those roots to really propagate. So what we've come up with is a 5-inch diameter, 2-foot long polypropylene sock that's filled with compost. It's a blend of compost, peat moss, and perlite. What's nice about this system, our GardenSoxx system, is that if you have a specific soil that you would like to use in your vertical wall, we can fill these socks with your soil. So we work with some designers and landscape architects that they have a specific soil they want to use, and we fill the socks with that soil. Generally, we there's some, we have to get the soil and get it to our manufacturing site, but so generally, we use our compost, peat moss, and perlite, but if you have a custom soil you'd like to use, we're able to do that. And then these socks are either planted on site with, usually the largest size that would work is a 4-inch potted plant, or they're planted ahead of time at the nursery with some plugs. So basically, they're grown. The ideal is having these socks grown in at a nursery under controlled conditions, and then when the system is in place, the socks are delivered with the plants, and they're just dropped right in place. So again, here's all the components put together. On the left, you can see the lateral. So it's a lateral 1/2-inch drip tubing that's connected to 1/4-inch laser tubing that has emitters built in. And our trays allow for this 1/4-inch tubing to go all the way through, and again, allow the plants access to water right at the root system. In the middle here, we have quite a few details of our system. You can see we have the anchor system, the galvanized wire, the tray, the plastic tray that's connected, and the GardenSoxx, and then the plants planted in. And then the right, you can see it planted. So again, we'd like to just present another alternative to the vertical living wall world. There's quite a few systems out there. A lot of them are great, and we've come up with one that we think is cost effective and actually can provide a successful planting environment vertically. So we're going to look at 2 more slides, and then we're going to get into some case studies. But so here's an outdoor edible wall. This is down at UC Irvine, the great park down in Irvine, California. They wanted a vegetable garden right outside, and this is basically 4x4s that are mounted. Our galvanized wire and anchors are mounted right to these 4x4s. So this is a great solution for an outdoor divider. So if you have a backyard and you want to divide some backyards up, you can plant this on both sides and plant it with vegetables or ornamentals. On the right is a little close up of the tray that has the drip emitter line in it, and then also showing how the water kind of pools up. But if it doesn't allow too much water to pool up, it'll go down these out these holes here. So again, just a close up of the tray, and the sock just sits right in here. And then, so that was outdoor. This is indoor. So again, we see a lot of indoor applications. So indoor, obviously is going to be a little more tricky because you have to come up with some waterproofing, and then you also have to figure out how you're going to collect the water at the bottom as it drips through the plants. But on the right, what I put this picture up to show you on the right is this is an installation that was grown in at the nursery. So basically, the nursery is contracted to grow in these socks, and when the system was in place and ready for installation, this is probably maybe a month of growth or so, and that they're able to just bring these plants and set them right in place, and you had a full wall ready to go. On the right are just some more benefits of living walls. I think, having, there's people have plants and trees in indoors, and there's obviously obvious benefits to having indoor growth. So I don't know if we want to answer some of the questions now, Damien, or before we get into the case studies, or.
Yeah, so just got a question from Brian Perry, who is asking if this system can be mounted on brick for residential purposes. Also, backing up that, he was asking about 4x4 or 8x8 cedar posts.
Yes, absolutely. So back here, we'll look at that first anchor. So this is just a concrete wall. So anything that can handle, it's about 20 pounds per square foot is the weight, so, and generally, if you can, if it's a solid structure that can be bolted into, there's usually there's no issues with the weight. And then also a cedar should be no problem. Absolutely. And we're going to look at some case studies of where there's some wood and concrete applications, but absolutely you should be able to bolt into that no problem.
Okay, that's all for now. Continue on.
Great. So we're going to look at some case studies. I happen to be a representative on the central coast of California. I mean, it's a tough job. Someone's got to do it. But so I get to go to, fun places on the coast, and Santa Barbara is one of the places that we installed our project, one of our living walls. This is a Santa Barbara Zoo. They kind of had the old school living wall, just throwing some pallets up and putting some wood in there and throwing some dirt in, and some nice donor came along and said, hey, why don't we make this look nicer and do a real living wall? So they called me, and I came down, and we planned on doing a 100 square foot living wall. So basically just the whole face where these pallets are. So we took everything out, and you can see this is just basically a cedar fence with fence posts and rails. And what we did was we figured out where the rails were on the left. You can see in this photo, we worked with the existing fence, and we just mounted these anchors right where the rails were going along the fence. So again, simple. These anchors were used 3-inch wood screws, and they mounted right into a rail that was 2x4 rail. So basically, mounted the anchors in. We attached our galvanized wire with our Gripple anchors, and then started putting the trays in. So again, me and one other person did this. We did a 100 square foot installation in about 3-4 hours to do this. So it's like Legos. It goes, once you start getting the components in place. I taught the gentleman how to do it, in 30 minutes, and he figured it out pretty quick. There's no tricks to this. There's nothing really difficult about installing this. So these were planted on site. Obviously, they went to the nursery and brought in some vegetable plants. We planted the socks right there and just popped them in place. The irrigation was already in place. And this is probably after, probably a couple weeks of some growth, but you can see some great vegetables there that are growing, and they use this to feed this is kitty corner to the elephant display. So pretty popular area, but, kind of looks a lot nicer than what they had before with the pallets. So that was a fun little project. That's it grown in there. And just basically he had connected it to his existing irrigation line that was already existing. I would definitely recommend the vertical living wall systems to have their own valve so that you can run the irrigation separately from, in-ground plants, because the vertical walls need specific irrigation timing. And idea behind it is that you irrigate it just enough so that the GardenSoxx are moist. I mean, it again depends on the type of plant, but you don't really need to have a cascading waterfall of water dripping down the wall. Basically, the water is going to be delivered right to the bottom of the system, and the plants are going to absorb through capillary action the water right up to the roots. So you can deliver that water directly to the roots without having to really overwater or waste water. So again, nice interior system that was designed. The bottom is obviously a catch basin to catch any overflow. But again, especially with indoor walls, indoor plants, they need very little water. They need water because they'll, obviously they need the right specific amount of water. And that's what another thing that's nice about our system is that using the emitter line, say a 6-inch on center emitter line will give 2 emitters per tray. And if it's a 1 gallon per hour emitter, you can measure exactly how much water you're going to deliver to each sock. This was in Silicon Valley. That's a place called The Pad, and they wanted some kind of divider to divide up their office space. It's shared office space, and again, just as a freestanding system. Actually has a pump in the bottom that is recirculating the water. So it needs to be plugged in. The pump needs to be plugged in. But again, just a nice independent freestanding system that can be moved around pretty easily. This is a interesting installation. This was an engineering firm where they wanted to, just kind of do a demo of our product. What we did here is, instead of penetrating the wall, you can see up in the top, their engine is an engineering firm, so they helped us figure out what kind of chains we needed to hang it. But basically, we hung it from some chain link, from some chains. You can see the top right. And the other reason I put these pictures in is to show on the left, this is what we planted initially on site, and they liked it. And it was for we had a seminar there. And then, but the owner wanted succulents because that wall had direct sunlight, and it's a lead office space, and they wanted to try and use the least amount of water as possible. So we basically took all these plants out and put in some succulents that were already grown in. You can see how they look really nice. And again, it's really simple, quick switch out. Took no time at all. Some close-ups here. Again, this is a hanging system that's not attached to the wall at all, and turned out to be a pretty successful install.
Just before we get too much further, Sean, we
Yeah.
do have a few questions that cropped up in the last few minutes, so we might answer a few of those.
Absolutely.
Brian Patrick has just asked, would the height of the wall be limited to the drip irrigation tubing, i.e. Netafim will hold 8 feet of water? Any thoughts on that?
Well, so I'm not really exactly sure if I understand the question right. So basically what you'd have to do is run, if the water requirements per plant, you'd have to calculate, and then you just run you'd have to have multiple valves, which I'm going to show on this Monterey Hotel. This system, as you can see, is 1,500 square foot, and there are I think 6 valves feeding the water to this system. So I'm not sure the height requirement, but so these valves were installed. I don't have a photo of the valves installed, but basically the valves were installed vertically on the wall. So the first valve was at the top, the second valve was a couple feet down from the top. So yeah, there's definitely some pressure, and there's some issues with making sure you have the correct pressure and flow rate. But there shouldn't be any height issues if you have the water. Basically you have to have the water delivery system correct.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll just check in with Brian and make sure that his question is answered there. But we've got another question from Michael Jones asking if this can be installed on a curved wall. Yeah, I'm not sure how the installation method might change.
Yeah, great question. So this I'd have to find out the tolerances, but everything can be bent. So this galvanized wire can be, obviously you don't want to bend it too much, but and I'd have to figure out what the tolerances are on that. But yeah, absolutely, the galvanized wire, if you just picture being able to shape it to the wall, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Okay. Ronaldo is actually asking if we can see a closer detail of the connection between the galvanized wire and the Gripple Anchor. So I'll just kind of answer that one, because we actually have these details accessible on Landeffects right now. We've just put them in recently, and so you can actually find those in the Detail Explorer under Planting, and just look for Filtrexx, and we actually have the a single detail for the Vertexx living wall system, which details a lot of the stuff that Sean has been talking about. And we also have some details on a different Filtrexx system, but that's something you might want to explore outside of the webinar, Reynaldo. So I hope that works for you. But we do have one last question or a request from Tamara, who is saying that she has problems with the top being too dry and the bottom being too wet on the wall. So I'm assuming that she has a Vertexx system installed with her, and she's saying that the top dies with too little water and the bottom dies because it gets too much water. She's changed the plants and the drip with still no luck. She's asking for any tips.
Yeah, absolutely. Now this is a Vertexx system that's installed.
Tamara, are you able to?
Or is this just a general like issues with living walls that she's inspected?
She hasn't confirmed yet. So
so great question. Both of those. I apologize. I will make sure next time on this slideshow there's a close up of the Gripple Anchor connecting to the galvanized wire. Basically, the Gripple system has connectors, and then basically it's there's a galvanized wire that holds the galvanized strip that cinches into the galvanized wire. I apologize. Again, those closer up details are on Land Effects, and then also on our website under Vertexx. We have quite a few video installations that show that, but I apologize. Yeah, I should have had that in this. I don't have that. And then regarding the issues with the top being too dry and the bottom getting too wet,
just to confirm, Tamara has just let us know that she's not using Filtrexx right now. She's trying different companies.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, that let me see if I can. Why don't we go back to? That's a great question. I think that was the idea of behind this the whole invention of the system was figuring out how to deliver water equally to each plant that's on the vertical wall. As you can see on the right, so if the plants are planted on site and the root system has not gone through the whole garden sock, where it's basically if the roots aren't at the bottom of the sock, you would have to run a drip system just for establishment on the top of our sock, if that makes any sense. So basically, if you just planted it and the roots aren't at the bottom, you would have to run one line at the top. And then eventually, within establishment period, you could take that line off. And as you can see, the tray is going to hold the tray is going to deliver the water right to the root system. And so again, the strategy behind the design of this system is that you don't have water going from level to level. Basically, you water it just enough so that each sock absorbs the amount of water it needs for the plant's needs, and then so that would avoid having the cascading effect of the water dripping all the way down. So again, there's some tweaks and techniques, and there's definitely once it gets dialed in though, it's usually good to go. So I hope that answered your question regarding the irrigation needs of the plant. But that hopefully, I think the idea behind the Vertexx was to help solve those problems.
Yep, so we're good to continue on.
Okay, so this is an interesting project. This is in the city of San Luis Obispo. This is a hotel that took up the whole footprint of the property. So basically, the developer said, hey, we're going to put this, a couple 100-room hotel in. We want to take the whole footprint of the property. Just to the right of this picture is the San Luis Obispo Creek. And the city said, hey, that's fine, but you cannot allow any stormwater to run off your site. So they said, you can do whatever you want, but when it rains, we don't want to see any water coming off your site, because it's a big parking lot area. There's obviously some pollutants that would probably run off into the creek. So the solution was they built, I think, is a 50 or 100,000 gallon cistern just below. You can see the pipe here that all the stormwater is going to flow into this pipe. So these huge cisterns are just underneath where this wall is. And the plan was, which if anybody knows the Central Coast, I mean, I'll be surprised if those cisterns get filled up, but say those cisterns are filled with water and there's a storm approaching, there's going to be a rain event. They have to get rid of that water out of those cisterns to be able to allow for that next rain event to fill the cistern. So what they came up with was this 1,500 square foot living wall that is going to be watered by the recycled water from these cisterns. So obviously the benefit of using recycled water is good. They're not going to be using up city water, but then also the secondary benefit is that they're filtering that stormwater through the planted material, so that if it does say that they use all that stormwater to plant the material through the planted material, and it drips through and it runs off, it's going to be somewhat cleaned up through the soil. So this is a great project. We got brought in to value engineer. There was another company that was specified for this wall, and the cost just for the product material was 3 times the amount for our whole installation with labor and plant. So we were able to save the developer a good chunk of change, and then also come up with a great solution. So again, you can see how basically they had their crew come in, they put in all the anchors, now they put the wire in. I don't have photos. They have scaffolding all around it right now because it's at a stage of they're putting the texture on the walls, but hopefully I'll be able to update these slides with the finished product. And then I think what they were growing were some native grasses on the back of this wall. And then here's a fun little residential installation, so it doesn't have to be, it can go from, 1,500 square foot commercial to, this is a little 4x4 residential wall that was planted. You can see on the left, it was planted on site. They didn't want to pay for the expense of getting it planted at the nursery. And then a few weeks later, you can see on the right, they're growing. So that's a fun little residential wall. So our price range, Live Wall and G-Sky, they're definitely on the premium higher end. I would say we're somewhere in the middle. Our MSRP is $50 per square foot, but there's labor costs, there's plant costs. So as you all know, living wall systems can get up to $100, $150 a square foot with all those costs. But our out the door product costs, so basically all you have to do is install it. You need to come with labor and plants, but everything else is taken care of for MSRP of around $50 a square foot. And then Woolly Pockets, they're kind of a residential lower end system, which basically is just some felt material. It's a great product, but again, just to give you a price range of where we sit in the living wall world. Seems like so that's where we're at there, and then and that's it. That's all I have. I'd love to answer any more questions, and if there's my contact information. If you have something offline you want to email me about, or a project, we have in Gilroy, we have manufacturing facilities all over the nation. We can provide material in all 50 states. We usually work with local compost facilities to fill the socks. And again, we sell at this time. We don't go through distribution. We sell direct. So we have pro partners. We have basically our pro partners are installers that know our system. But again, the system, I could teach someone how to install it in 20 minutes. There's really not much to it. But if again, we sell direct. We'll usually sell direct either to the developer or to the end user, or we'll sell to the contractor that's installing it.
Okay, we definitely have a couple of questions. Nina Butler has asked, and you kind of have answered this already, but the average cost per square foot on the freestanding system, similar to the first one. So I think it might have been that San Jose company, actually.
Oh yeah, great question. We can look at that real quick. So this was interesting. This was, we had we just sell the components. So we sell, as I don't want to, we sell all these components. So we're in the business of selling the components. So this is all we sell. The pad, this freestanding system, the company contracted with a carpenter that built all this, and then we just sold the carpenter our system. So yeah, I think this, the pad ended up paying, I don't know, maybe $4,000 or $5,000 for this when it was all said and done. But again, our component cost was about $50 a square foot. I'm honestly not sure exactly what the carpenter charged, or and then there's a plant cost. But yeah, that was probably in that $4,000 or $5,000 range. I could find out for you who through the carpenter who built it, because he's actually after this project he's starting to build these quite a bit. So unfortunately, I can't give you the end cost on that. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So we have another couple of questions, two actually from Michael Payne. The first one is waterproofing needed for the interior walls?
Yes, we recommend, basically you can take a standard drywall, drywall wall, and you can put, there's not sure exactly the name of it, but you can put a weatherproofing material right on the wall. Because really, as you can see on the detail, it stands off the wall pretty good. So the drywall, you can see in this detail that there's about a 1 5/8 inch standoff. So for this water to even get on here, be highly unlikely. But yeah, you should definitely put some waterproofing. A lot of times, contractors will build, because they'll build this inset into the wall, so it's kind of like it's set into the wall, so there's the plants are just right at the wall surface, so they'll sometimes just weatherproof that whole system on the inside. Waterproof it. But yeah, you definitely recommend waterproofing.
Okay, and the second part of Michael's question, a little different, but he also wants to hear a little bit more about the long-term maintenance of plants and the hardware. Weeding, as an example, is that a problem?
So yeah, weeds. I think you said weeds, right? Weeding.
Yes. Weeding.
Yeah. So compost. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with compost, but the way compost works, if it's certified compost media, it's been it's weed free. There's not going to be any weeds in the soil. But what happens, I see a lot, is at the nursery, when the plugs are planted, there's weeds in the plugs. So yeah, that's something you just have to watch for. To be honest, a lot of the living wall maintenance companies that I've worked with and talked with is that what people don't think about for interior are the pest issues. So you don't want to bring pests indoors, and so there's some definitely maintenance issues to get the pests under control. The pests are not my forte, but insects and pests you can easily bring in through plants. But most living wall maintenance companies have a plan for making sure there's no pests in the living wall. But regarding the maintenance, that would probably be really there's probably some trimming and some making sure the plants are looking nice, but there really should be no weeds or issues. Again, the pests, once the pests are taken care of, then it's usually fine. But
okay, another question from Darby Wilcox, who's saying that they are a Filtrexx Pro partner in the Denver area, and they have an installation scheduled for an exterior wall in a residential setting. Would they be able to utilize a pump to recirculate water rather than connecting to an actual valve, like the same way that they'd use a pump in a water feature?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for installing our product first off. But yeah, so again, there's a couple of issues with recirculating water. Obviously, you got to make sure that basin that the pump is in has water. So I'm not really, so I guess you'd have to visually inspect it. A lot of, like, I know from my landscape background, a lot of water features have a float valve. So basically the float valve, when the water feature drops to a certain level, the float valve turns on and there's a water connection, a main line that's connected all the time to that float valve, and it fills up the water feature once it gets down to a certain level. So again, with this system, the recirculating pump is fine, but you got to make sure that the pump doesn't burn out if there's no water in it. So but it easily could be done. The only thing is, you obviously, the way you deliver the water up, because I don't know how high it's going to be, but up the lateral line and then through the emitters, you want to make sure you have enough pressure and enough volume to make sure you're feeding the emitters the correct amount of pressure and water.
Okay. Just a couple of other questions. In regards to the irrigation system that's applied to each wall, is there a specific drip line and lateral line that you recommend or use, or is that a thing that's determined per client on a per client basis?
Yeah. So again, it's the designer's choice. And Netafim, from my experience, Netafim is probably one of the most, I'm sure Hunter and Rainbird wouldn't be happy with me saying this, but Netafim happens to be one of the most prolific drip emitter systems out there. That's what I would recommend is Netafim. But again, it's most yeah, I mean, it'd be great. It probably should be specified, just there's no question. So I'd honestly recommend Netafim, but Rainbird, Hunter, there's so many drip tube companies out there nowadays, but Netafim's been around, I would say, the longest, and they have probably one of the best reputations of dependency, and they have great customer service. But so again, yeah, my recommendation would be Netafim for the drip emitter line, and then the lateral line is just a standard 1/2-inch drip tubing. So whatever, again, that could be any company, but I'm not. So yeah, so a 1/2-inch drip, the 1/2-inch lateral line could be anybody, but the emitters, basically, just in case anyone isn't familiar with what an emitter line is, it's a quarter. It can be different sizes, but this happens to be a 1/4-inch drip tube, and it has the emitter built into the tube so that it allows specific amount of water with the right pressure and right volume, allows a specific amount of water, and it's usually measured in gallons per hour. So that's where the emitter line is really important to have, so you can control the flow of water to the plants.
Okay, great. We have another question that's just come up from Scott Murakami, who is asking, how often does the GardenSoxx media need to be changed out?
Yeah, great question. So that would be like, so I guess you could ask, depending on what you plant in a potted plant on in your patio, like when does that potted plant need their soil changed out in a sense? So I guess the question is relative to what you're planting, but generally speaking, the ornamentals should last 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, there should be, basically the roots are going to die off and create carbon and give access to the plants. But that's a great question, because I forgot to bring this up, is that a fertigation system is definitely important. So either fertilizing by hand or fertilizing with liquid fertilizer through the drip system is going to allow for longevity for the plants. But yeah, again, that so like the vegetable garden that we showed, basically once those vegetables have grown out and their lifespan's over, it's so much easier just to put brand new sock in and plant new plants instead of trying to pull out the old vegetables. And so basically what the Santa Barbara Zoo did was they just pulled out the vegetables that were, cut the sock open, created a compost pile, and then you could actually recycle our mesh sock. You can throw it in the recycle bin. It's polypropylene, and they just got new socks and planted new plants. It's just so much faster than to pull out a plant and try and replant it, putting new growing material in there. So yeah. So sorry, the answer to your question is somewhat relative, but I would say ornamentals should last honestly indefinitely if you have right fertilization, the right, watering system. And, for sure, 3 to 5 years, I'd imagine, should be fine.
Okay, cool. I guess just one last question um, that might be a little more forward thinking, but are there any circumstances that you know of or that anyone at Filtrexx could foresee that would require additional reinforcements or might provoke, sort of a version 2.0 for this, I guess, already successful design?
Um, yeah, not, I mean, so basically the whole plan was, hey, let's come up with a living wall system that can have a nice big growing media for the plants to grow in. Um, and I don't have the technical specifications with me right now, but Gripple Anchor and our galvanized wire, we can give you shear strength, stress strength. The biggest thing is when you do these walls up on a roof. So say you had a vertical living wall and you're up high somewhere, you got to make sure that the socks aren't going to blow out and fall and land on somebody. So we've done all those stress tests for wind flow, and we actually have anchors that anchor the socks into the trays. So yeah, I'm not sure if the question was that they don't think that it's going to be stable or strong enough for maybe a high-rise building, but we have again technical specs through Gripple, through our galvanized wire manufacturer, and then also the weight of our socks are basically can be clamped in place so those socks don't fall out. So at this point, yeah, I'm not sure if I don't think there's any plans for any more reinforcement, just because we believe it's been designed to withstand any compared to it can be compared to any other living wall out there and can withstand any issues, I believe.
Oh, that's a good way to sort of sign that off. That's looking like all the questions that we have for now. But if you do end up having any further questions, feel free to call us or email us or get in touch with Sean directly. His email and cell is on the final slide there. So we'll be posting this webinar up on our website if you'd like to rewatch or pass it on to anyone who has missed it already. Or if you've missed any details yourself, go back and listen in. We just want to thank Sean for taking the time today and in the previous couple of weeks in getting this organized, as well as everyone who's participated today and getting involved. So we hope everyone had a good morning and is ready for the weekend. Thank you again, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Damon. Thanks, everyone. Please feel free to call or email with any follow-up questions.